Hello guys, welcome back to our Fanfic Hub channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the protector of the maidens and got harem? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. In the White Citadel, the Princess Knights had convened once again. Celestine was ready to disclose her decision, however two members of their number were missing. One, they knew had been captured by the enemy. But the other princess, Prim, was nowhere to be found, and she was not the type to arrive late without a good reason. They agreed to wait for a little longer, expecting the young Pinkette to come through the doors at any moment and showering them with apologies for making them wait, but still she didn't arrive. Not like Prim-chan to hold things up. Maya muttered as she took a long drink from a tankard of ale, glaring at the entrance to the meeting chambers. Oh dear. I hope nothing bad has happened. Celestine muttered in a worried tone, placing an open palm against her cheek. Had Prim gotten into an accident of some sort? You think her scummy suitors are badgering her again? If they're bothering Prim-chan again, then Roro will bite them a lot. And they will all hate it. The halfling shouted while gnashing her teeth for emphasis. The other princesses giggled a bit at Roro's protective and energetic nature. Still, that was definitely a possibility. Prim had countless suitors that sought her hand in marriage, her cousin Alicia often being the one to chase them away. If poor Prim was being heckled by more suitors, then it was no wonder she was late. On a side note, why was Roro so obsessed with biting people? The doors to the meeting chambers opened, and the various princesses smiled, believing their comrade had finally arrived. However, it was not Prim that entered. It was a woman with dark skin and silver hair, a pair of wolf ears atop her head, identifying her status as a beast woman, and a large two-handed sword strapped to her back. She was accompanied by the form of Claudia's father-in-law, Graves, who had a stern expression on his face. Maya was the first to recognize the wolf woman and spoke up, "Holy shit. That's Leona, the boss of the Hakuro mercenary company." The now identified Leona stepped forward and began to explain herself. "Apologies for the sudden intrusion, but it is my regret to inform you that your Princess Prim has been taken by the enemy." Dead silence permeated the room as everyone could only stare in shock at this news. Sensing the oncoming barrage of questions, the silver-haired woman continued. "The princess approached the enemy under a white flag in order to attempt negotiating a ransom for her cousin. My scouts report that she and her caravan entered the first fortress, but never came back out. Before she went on this mission, she contracted me and my mercenaries to guard the second fortress for her and to pass the word along if she failed or succeeded." Most of the Princess Knights could only stare blankly in shock, the one exception being Kaguya, who seemed to be in deep concentration, her lips moving silently as if she was whispering a mantra. The first to snap out of their stupor was Claudia as she slammed a fist into the table, creating a series of large cracks across the marble surface as she shouted, "Those heathens! Have they no honor? Taking a defenseless girl under a white flag?" Graves crossed his arms and huffed as he spoke in a callous tone, "What a foolish girl. There is no negotiating with the Legion. We're all just meat to them. So what? She should have just left her cousin in there." Maya shouted as she threw her now empty bottle at the aged knight's head, making him lean to the side, allowing the bottle to sail harmlessly past him. The crimson-haired woman then jumped from her seat and shouted, "That is it. I am done beeping around. We are all going to march on the Legion and get our friends back." This earned a cheer from Roro, who was now wildly swinging her axe around. Claudia nodded in agreement as she drew her blade, and Kaguya broke from her meditation, her face a blank mask as she slowly nodded as well. "I'm afraid that the final decision lies with Celestine-sama." Graves muttered with a deep frown, not liking where things were going with this. The high elf nodded as she stood to her full height and began to speak. "Indeed. I am afraid that the decision has been made for us. We will." She left her sentence hanging at the end, a dizzy spell overcoming as her vision began to swim and blur. "We will," she tried to finish, but the words wouldn't come out as she felt her body heating up. "Is something wrong, Celestine-sama? You don't look well." The goddess-loyal bodyguard noted, seeing that the high elf was becoming pale, and then she saw crimson droplets leaking from her nose. "Celestine-sama. You're bleeding." Claudia shouted with the other princesses staring in surprise and worry. Celestine placed 2 of her fingertips to her nose and then pulled them back, seeing the crimson liquid staining her fingers. Then her eyes rolled into her head as she collapsed like a puppet with its strings being cut, only just barely hitting the floor thanks to the quick intervention of Claudia and Maya who managed to catch her in time. "Doctor! Somebody summon a doctor!" Claudia shouted out. Ruru immediately rushed out of the meeting chambers to seek help. The elf goddess' breath was shaky and uneven, all the while her dear friends tried in vain to comfort her and keep her calm, all the while trying to figure out what was wrong with her. In the background, Kaguya pulled out a trio of leaves hidden inside her sleeves and inserted them into her mouth, closing her eyes as she began chewing on them. "Now is not the time for snacking." Maya snapped angrily at the priestess, but the black-haired woman didn't react as she approached Celestine's twitching and spasming on the floor. Kaguya then placed her lips over the blonde elf's own and used her tongue to push the chewed-up leaves into the goddess' mouth. "Swallow," she ordered, and tilted Celestine's head back to assist her in gulping down the contents in her mouth. The goddess' throat bobbed, signaling that she had swallowed, and color began to return to her face and her breathing relaxed and steadied. The others stared in amazement at this scene. Whatever the priestess had given the high elf, it worked like magic. "The hell?" Graves muttered, the others slowly nodding since that perfectly summed up what had happened. They all turned to the aloof priestess, their eyes silently demanding an explanation. Standing back to her full height, Kaguya then spoke. "My god told me that someone would attempt to do harm to Celestine-sama and to keep those herbs on hand to prevent her demise." "Who? Who would do such a horrible thing? Celestine-sama is a saint. She couldn't and wouldn't even harm a fly." Claudia demanded angrily, her fist clenching tightly and her eyes blazing with red-hot fury. "Is it not obvious? The Legion are behind this. They have poisoned her. There is no other explanation for this. Our indecision has left us open and vulnerable to the enemy. We have to prepare ourselves before it is too late." Graves shouted, earning a nod of agreement from his daughter-in-law. Normally, Claudia was a calm and collected individual who supported her beloved friend in Charge's ideals of peace. Now, she held nothing but rage in her heart, her serene demeanor giving way to her growing hatred. Due to her skill in battle and role as the bodyguard of the goddess herself, people refer to her as the invincible Valkyrie, and she was going to show the Legion exactly why she had earned that epithet. However, there was something else that needed to be addressed. "You knew this would happen. Why didn't you say anything?" The Valkyrie asked, glaring heatedly at the priestess who was currently cleaning the blood from Celestine's face with a cloth. Both Maya and Graves looked at the priestess in suspicion, the former having a softer expression as she hoped that there was a good explanation for why Kaguya hadn't said anything. "I would have, but my god forbade it. If I had said anything, then Celestine-sama would surely have died." The priestess explained calmly, her words prompting Graves to grab her by her robes and pull her up to eye level as he stared deeply into her eyes. "We're going to need more than that. We have tolerated you and your beliefs in your foreign god for too long. You had better start talking." The aged warrior shouted, causing large droplets of saliva to splash onto the priestess' face, but she remained unflinching and unfazed as she stared back with a listless expression. "I am not the enemy. The real enemy is still after Celestine-sama's life." Kaguya responded slowly and carefully, which seemed to anger the old soldier further. He seemed almost ready to strangle the priestess to death but was stopped by his daughter-in-law who placed a hand on his shoulder. "She is right, the Legion are still out there. Who knows what they may be plotting? I have known Kaguya-san for some time now, and Celestine-sama also trusted her. I know for a fact she wouldn't do anything without just cause, and she would never do harm to Celestine-sama. As we witnessed just now, she gave her the antidote to what ailed her." Claudia spoke to her father-in-law, attempting to calm him. Convenient how she happened to have the antidote on hand. "Perhaps she is the assassin?" the aged man questioned, earning a small scoff from Maya who gave a look that said, "Are you serious? You going senile, you old shit? If she was the assassin, then she could have just let Celestine-sama die. We need to figure out how she was poisoned to begin with so that it won't happen again." Maya shouted angrily and then reached up and pulled the priestess out of Graves' grip. Kaguya simply straightened her hair and clothes in a relaxed manner, completely ignoring the fact that she could have been throttled. Even in his old age, Graves Levantine was still known for his great strength. Had he attempted to strangle her, her throat would have easily been crushed. Leona remained in the background, largely forgotten by everyone as she observed the scene before her. If you have time to point fingers, then you have time to take the fight to the Legion. The wolf woman finally spoke up, earning the attention of everyone. She then continued, while you're yelling and playing whodunit, the Legion are still out there and could penetrate deeper into Alliance territory at any time. If the enemy's goal was to divide us, it would seem they are succeeding. The room fell into silence at her words as the princesses and the old knight exchanged looks, and silently came to agree with her statement. She was right. If they continued arguing, then nothing would get done and then the war would be lost. Suddenly, Roro burst into the chambers with a female bishop in tow. Help has arrived. Is she alive? Tell Roro that Selasama is alive. If nobody says something, then Ro is gonna scream and bite everyone. The little halfling shouted, bouncing up and down with tears in her eyes. She is alive. I had the antidote. Kaguya spoke, sparing everyone's eardrums from rupturing. The last person who made Roro scream at the top of her lungs ended up losing their sense of hearing. The attack dog then quickly wrapped her little arms around the priestess' waist, anime tears falling down her face as she cried out, "Wah! Thank you so much." The halfling wailed, her words becoming incoherent as tears and snot fell down her face. There. The black-haired girl spoke gently and soothingly patted the orangette's head to calm her. The halfling then broke off the hug and bounced back, wildly swinging her battle axe with reckless abandon, making everyone step back to avoid getting hit by it. Who did this? Who? Rosama demands to know. Ro will kill them all. Ro will find them and chop them up and bite them and do horrible things to them. Ro will do it. Yes. Ro will deliver unimaginable pain and torture on them and bite them. The enraged halfling shouted, making Maya gulp nervously in the background, since halflings were known for three things. First, they were known for their unwavering loyalty to their friends and family. Secondly, they were an all-female race that was supposedly capable of mating with any species. Thirdly, despite their tiny frames, they were inhumanely strong, especially when enraged. On one occasion an enormous bear stole Roro's food when she went to do her business in the woods. When she found the bear helping itself to her foodstuff, halfling princess flew into a rage and wrestled down that bear using only her hands and even broke its spine. Leona stepped forward and stopped the halfling princess axe with her large sword, causing sparks to fly. If it is your wish to fight, then come with me. We shall face the Legion together at the second fortress. Everyone, we will hold the second fortress as long as possible. You marshal your forces so that we may mount a counterattack against the Legion. The beast woman spoke, causing the orangette's eyes to light up and sparkle. Yes. Rosama will fight too. The halfling stated excitedly and then turned towards the goddess bodyguard and said, Roro will let you take command of the halfling army for now. Rosama is finally off to war. With that said, the halfling and beast woman made their exit, leaving the others behind. Now then, Claudia, I may have a plan. With Leona's assistance we may be able to turn things around. Graves muttered, causing his daughter-in-law to slowly turn to him, ready to listen to his strategy now. No matter what, she would avenge her friend. She would not let this attempt on Celestine's life go unpunished. Before we speak on any further matters regarding the war, we should get Celestine-sama to her chambers so that she may rest and be better protected. The female bishop stated, earning a series of nods from the others. Claudia picked up the elven goddess in a bridal carry and took her away to her private chambers so that she may recover in peace. Kaguya approached the bishop and stated, You are Bishop Eleonora Byrne. The female bishop turned and bowed slightly before replying, Correct. Though some refer to me as Bishop L for short. I don't believe we have met before now. We have not. The priestess stated before closing her eyes and seemed to be silently praying until she spoke aloud again, I shall pray for Celestine-sama's safety. This war is going to get much uglier before things get better. Indeed. I cannot imagine just how much worse things can get, or maybe I simply don't want to. Eleonora spoke as she too joined in prayer, praying to the goddess for protection. Once she was done praying, she followed after the Valkyrie so that she may further tend to Celestine. Kaguya said nothing as she returned to her own prayers to her mysterious god. During this time, Maya was currently deep in her own thoughts as she adopted a thinking pose. Kaguya was right, things were going to get worse. Much worse. Something had to be done, and fast. Meanwhile. First fortress. Naruto hummed a merry tune to himself as he walked along the hallways of his fortress, passing by human servants and his demonic soldiers, both of which he ignored. He had received summons from his mother, demanding his presence to speak of important matters. No doubt it would involve her loss of magic and perhaps the invasion. Their next stop being the second fortress, which possessed the strongest defenses in the alliance. When he had earlier stated that it was the least defended, he had meant that it was manned by a skeleton crew, militia mostly, and a few of the Fire family's own soldiers. Prim had not said anything about her arrangements, but Naruto guessed that she must have hired a mercenary company. No surprise there. When a war drags on for centuries, there is no shortage of mercenaries to hire. His former homelands, the shinobi nations, were proof of that. He entered a chamber, decorated with black marble, and found his mother in only her birthday suit, reclining on a chair as Chloe knelt down in front of her, massaging her queen's long legs, kneading them and pouring warm oil on her body. Ah! Naruto! Welcome! The queen greeted him in a somewhat lazy voice, obviously enjoying the oil massage. Her dark skin glistened in the light, which made her naked body all the more erotic. The whiskered teen smiled at his mother, feeling blood rushing to his loins. She took notice of the bulge growing in his pants and spoke in a teasing voice, "MMM. It seems someone is getting excited. How long has it been since you last received some relief?" "Too long. Been busy. Invading a nation, capturing princesses, and sorting through the prime minister's grimy stain-covered paperwork had been something of a grind, especially that last part." He replied at the end with a grimace, earning some looks of disgust from the dark elves, which was replaced by a soft moan from the queen as her loyal aide began massaging the arches of her feet. Anything of interest?" His mother questioned, wondering if the prime minister had any more skeletons in his closet. The more ammunition they had against him, the easier it would be to convince the people that she was obviously the superior and more fair rules. Happy and content people are the easiest to control after all. Fear and terror could only go so far in subduing the sheep. Any tyrant can become feared, but a true ruler is at least respected if not completely loved by their subjects. Quite a bit. He's been stealing goods and embezzling money for his own dirty dealings. Nobody noticed since he was the one that supervised and kept track of everything, so there was no real oversight to keep him in check. He also hosted lavish underground parties to try and curry favor and cut deals with various nobles. He also spent this coin on prostitutes. Young blonde ones. The whiskered teen reported, causing both Chloe and Olga to start turning a little green. "Please. Talk about something else. I am in the middle of something here and I do not wish to vomit on Olga-sama." Chloe pleaded, earning an apologetic look from the Uzumaki as he gave a quick "sorry." Olga cleared her throat, letting out a soft moan as Chloe began massaging her thighs and then spoke, "Very good, my child. We can take advantage of this information. Also, I am going to arrange for a masquerade ball to take place. I think you might enjoy it." The whiskered teen tilted his head slightly and replied, "A ball? Already? A bit early to be celebrating, don't you think?" "Perhaps a bit, or perhaps not. Not only did you capture the first fortress with ease and terminate the Kuroinu, you have also claimed 2 of the 7 princesses in a very short amount of time. I'd say that calls for a little celebration. Additionally, all the nobility within the fortress will be gathered there and I plan to extract promises of loyalty and support from them." Olga explained, earning a nod of understanding from her son. "Not that I wish to question you, Olga-sama, but do you really think the nobility will stay loyal to you or keep their promises?" Chloe asked, her hands moving up her queen's body and began massaging her smooth stomach. "Of course not, but having them under my heel will make things easier in the long run. That aside, if they try to turn against me or undermine our operations, I shall leave my dear child to deal with them. The queen spoke with a devious little grin, knowing full well what happens to those who attempt to harm her or betray her. Leave it to me. The blonde teen replied and gave a dramatic bow, earning an appreciative smile from his mother. Her face took on a more grave expression as she clapped her hands twice, causing her aide to cease massaging her body and quickly fetched a towel and robe for her queen. One more thing, and perhaps most importantly. I believe I have found the reason behind my lack of magic. Olga stated, her expression hard as stone and her voice as sharp as a flint. I'm listening. Naruto spoke as he approached her while Chloe began patting down and drying off the queen's body and retrieved the purple bathrobe from the blonde half-elf. After running some tests and consulting my books, I have successfully determined that I am afflicted with some form of a curse. Powerful and forbidden magic. She spoke, her voice filled with venom, her eyes glaring daggers. That explains a bit. Vult and his men march on you, bust into your castle. The curse hits you and you're rendered powerless, enabling him to no. The Uzumaki stated, piecing things together as he helped slip the robe onto his mother's form. He then pressed his body to hers, tying the sash around her waist and inhaling her sweet scent. Indeed. In theory, if we find the source of this curse, we can end it and my power will return, though I think we both know who is behind this. Until that point of time I will need to take advantage of you, in more ways than one. Olga spoke in a husky voice, her cheeks taking on a dusting of pink as she reached down and grabbed her son's groin. From the feel of it, his balls must be so full that it must be painful for him. Feel free. I am and always will be yours. Your general, your shield, your son, your pet or plaything. Anything for you. Because I love you, mother. Naruto spoke and kissed the nape of his mother's neck. Just off to the side, Chloe watched the scene with a slight hint of jealousy, seemingly wanting to join in with perhaps the only two people she loves wholeheartedly. Olga knew that Naruto would do anything to please her. He would do anything for the ones he loves. Plush enjoyed experimenting and trying out different things in the bedroom to better please his lovers. She then gave a sadistic smile and stepped away from her son as she spoke later, my dear child. We have a party to plan, and besides, the pleasure of your release will be greatly heightened after you've been blueballed a bit. You're so cruel. Tease. Naruto replied in a mock-hurt tone, earning giggles from the two dark elves. The Forge Master then inwardly frowned. To whoever it was that had cursed his mother and set her and Chloe up to be sex toys, death would be too great a kindness for them. Elsewhere. The two princesses Alicia and Prim sat together in a comfortable silence, the latter sipping a cup of tea and the former staring out the window, observing a bird's nest that was tucked into a tree branch, a mother bird feeding her hatchlings. Alicia turned to her cousin, noting that the pinkette was now wearing a tracking collar like she was, which was now tied around Prim's ankle. Is something wrong, Alicia-chan? You seem like there's something on your mind. Prim noted as she set her cup down, which prompted the blonde princess to slightly frown and rest her chin on an open palm. I just didn't get it. The knight muttered, her fingers drumming on the table, and then she gestured at the room they shared, a comfortable suite that was fit for royalty, as she continued to speak. We're in the enemy's hands and yet we're being treated more like guests than prisoners. We're not rotting in a goddess-forsaken prison. He doesn't seem interested in showing us off or flaunting us as his trophies. More than the saved you from that poison instead of letting you die. I just don't understand that guy. Prim closed her eyes for a few moments and then spoke. I haven't been his captive for long, but from first impressions, I don't think that Naruto-san is a bad person. Still, I wish I knew why he would support Olga-san in her conquests, aside from the obvious of course. The blonde princess slowly nodded and replied, yeah, he didn't say it outright, but when he came to get me from the hospital said something odd. I think that maybe something bad happened to him when he was a child. He then hinted that there was something more to why Olga has been waging war against us, but he didn't elaborate on it. Ah. I almost forgot. He mentioned he was from the Far East like Kaguya, that he came from the Shinobi Nations. Do you recall anything about that? Shinobi Nations, I remember the name at least. I do remember Kaguya-chan telling me about them once, but I can't remember. Something about them being in an almost constant state of war, and not much else. Prim muttered in an unsure tone. That's more than I remember. Still, just what is his game? The blonde girl muttered. Thus far, the Forge Master had conducted himself in an honorable manner and was most definitely not a typical Legion marauder. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at their door, prompting the two princesses to call out, "Come in unison. Unsurprisingly, when the door opened, the form of their captor stepped inside, except he was accompanied by the forms of two dark elves. One Alicia recognized as the woman that accompanied him during their duel, Chloe. The other one they hadn't seen before, but they both had a strong idea of who she was. Ladies, allow me to introduce my dear mother and queen, Olga Discordia, and her retainer Chloe. Naruto spoke, introducing the two elven women. Prim immediately swept into a polite and graceful curtsy, a gesture that the queen returned in kind, while Alicia crossed her arms and stood defiantly, glaring at the Dark Queen. The person they had been fighting against for years, the woman who plunged Eos into a constant state of war. I see the nasty little one isn't with you. Alicia muttered, still remembering Luca's earlier rudeness. How dare she insinuate that she was trying to seduce Naruto? What even gave her that idea? Just thinking about being in bed with the enemy made her feel dirty. Oh, Luca. She's taking care of some things for me. Naruto answered as he leaned back against a wall. His mother approached the two princesses, a strange little smile on her face as she took in their forms. Noticing the pink-haired girl had a somewhat fearful look at being in her presence, while the blonde princess seemed like she wanted to strike the Dark Queen down if she had a weapon in her hand. She let out a soft laugh and then spoke in a tone of amusement. Two of the 7 princess knights. Alicia and Prim. We meet at last. I know what you think of me. It is no secret that everyone in Eos thinks of me as nothing but a monster or a warmonger. An evil dark elf with a grudge against humankind. Are you going to tell us that is all untrue? That you have waged war in Eos for years and years out of love and compassion for humans? Alicia asked sarcastically, her words making Chloe growl slightly under her breath, ready to pounce on the blonde knight for her insolence, but was stopped when her queen raised a hand. No. I do hate humans. With a deep passion, with the exclusion of my beloved child, of course. The queen added, gesturing to her son, who gave a small 2-fingered salute as Olga continued. I just want you to hear my side of the story. Whether you believe me or not is irrelevant, though maybe it will help you better understand my motives. Correct me if I am wrong, but prior to the founding of the church, the history of Eos largely remains a blank slate, yes? According to the texts, the people of Eos fled from a foreign nation that was embroiled in a big war that spanned the continent. Prim spoke up, having thoroughly studied history over the course of her education. A very expensive education. The queen nodded in acknowledgement and then stated matter-of-factly, true, but that is but a tiny piece of a much larger truth. One that has many holes poked into it by those in power and further deteriorated by time itself. Long ago, before humans even set foot on Eos, it was inhabited by the peaceful and compassionate High Elves, and the wild and proud Dark Elves. One day, humans began to arrive in droves, refugees fleeing from their war-torn homelands, as previously stated by Princess Prim. The High Elves quickly welcomed these newcomers with open arms, helping them settle and colonize the land to help them make a new home. The Dark Elves, however, were far more wary. Humans are complex and fickle creatures, and even the most well-meaning human can easily fall into the darkness. Time passed, and as the humans grew stronger and more numerous, they began aggressively expanding. The High Elves peacefully integrated themselves into this burgeoning human society. Meanwhile, we Dark Elves chose to live free as we always did in the wilds, far away from the influence of outsiders. As the years dragged on, both High Elves and Dark Elves became fewer and fewer in number within Eos. Humans have a funny way of breeding rapidly if given the chance. Eventually, what you know as the Church of Laurentia came to be, a religion that came to worship a member of the High Elves who possessed the power of clairvoyance and helped avert many disasters. However, behind the scenes, beneath the grandeur and splendor of the church, something much darker was brewing. What was once meant to be a bastion of peace and equality for all became twisted and corrupt, how and when I do not know. We dark elves were declared as corrupt beings and enemies of the goddess. We were hunted down for decades upon decades. Humans took many of my people as slaves, either for their twisted pleasure or for coin. Slowly but surely, my people were bred out or snuffed out by humans. Our lands and homes despoiled, and our high elven cousins remained ignorant of everything, blinded by the love and praise given to them by the humans, even as they slowly dwindled in number as well. Eventually, I was one of, if not the last pure-blooded dark elf in Eos. All of my friends and family, almost all of my people, dead or enslaved by humankind, and the humans who worship a living goddess, a high elf, a non-human, celebrated our demise, unfeeling and unsympathetic to our plight because we were dirty dark elves. I then made a resolution that I would tear the church down to the ground, with my bare hands if necessary. So I formed the Legion to avenge my fallen people and destroy the church. The sad reality is, that for all the preaching your church spews about love for others, it only applies to humans. The only reason they worship your current goddess Celestine is due to her clairvoyance, which they use for their own convenience. My army was strong but undisciplined, cobbled together from scratch. Monsters and brutes who only knew how to violate and despoil. The only thing keeping my army together was my own will and my ability to empower others. They were not the ideal army given their immoral nature, but I needed an army to fight the church. Then, quite ironically, a human child changed everything. The queen finished gesturing to her son once again. A look of deep nostalgia on her face, complete with a warm smile. At the end of her story, both of the princesses exchanged looks of uncertainty. On the one hand, it was certainly a sad story. Her people, her homelands, forcibly taken and defiled by humans who just kept on taking and taking, and their cousins, the high elves, remained ignorant of it all as they were worshipped. On the other hand, there was no proof of what she was saying. Her words could be little more than a ploy to mess with their heads and gain some form of sympathy. "You don't believe me?" Olga stated bluntly. She then gave a dismissive scoff and added, "Your belief is irrelevant to me, as I previously stated. However, mark my words, the church is now a cesspool of corruption. They shackle the minds of those who follow them, and despoil and destroy those that won't. Whatever they were when they were originally founded, it has long since been twisted into something ugly and wrong, and I will see the sins of the church dragged into the light and exposed for all to see. I just hope that you can arrive at the truth for yourselves before it is too late." With that said, the Dark Elf Queen turned on her heel and departed and made her way to the door, but before she exited the room Olga spoke. I almost forgot. My apologies. You're both invited to our masquerade ball that is being held tonight, and your presence is mandatory. Until our next meeting, my dears." With that said, Olga exited the room with her ever-present retainer following behind, leaving her child alone with the princesses. He slowly approached them, his hands on his hips while shaking his head as he spoke with a slightly saddened expression. "I think my mother has been holding that in for a while. She's been wanting to tell people her story for a long time. I think that, deep down, she is a really lonely person. Something I understand all too well, being alone. But now's not the time for sadness, it is now a time to have fun," he exclaimed at the end in an excited and chipper manner, surprising the two princesses at how quickly his mood changed. "Now let's see about getting you two ready. You're going to need masks and dresses. For Primheim, I'm thinking of a butterfly theme." Naruto muttered, snapping his fingers, causing a beautiful pink and white dress to appear before the gentle princess, along with a butterfly mask. "For Alicia, something bolder, I think. Let's see, you're strong and brave and loyal, and you'd do anything to protect your cousin. I'm thinking that a wolf theme would suit you," the Uzumaki said, snapping his fingers once again, which caused a dark blue and black dress to appear with a silver-colored wolf mask. He then waved his hand, placing a dividing screen between himself and the two princesses as their respective dresses floated into their hands. "Try them on for size, if you don't mind. They may need adjusting." The Forge Master directed. The princesses didn't like that they were being forced to attend a ball hosted by their enemy, but there was no choice in the matter given their present predicaments as prisoners. They slipped off their usual clothes and tried on their new ball dresses, and were surprised to find that they fit very comfortably. Alicia had to admit was pretty good with magic. She had seen many magic users during her time as a princess knight, all of varying degrees of skill, and many had difficulty performing even the most simple of spells. Naruto though. He seemed capable of conjuring most anything within reason, plus he was a forge master, there was no telling just how truly skilled he was. As a matter of fact, she doubted that he had yet to use his true power. The dresses fit okay. I kind of had to make rough estimates. Naruto admitted from his side of the divider, his question prompting the two cousins to respond in unison with a quick yes. You seem quite skilled and comfortable with using magic. Is there anything you can't do? The blonde princess asked, hoping to prod her fellow blonde a bit, who simply chuckled at her inquiry. Not that I wish to boast, but due to my unique circumstances, I have virtually inexhaustible reserves of energy. The whiskered teen answered, his words making the knight quirk up an eyebrow. There was that phrase again, one that he had used before, unique circumstances. What circumstances are those? Prim asked, unknowingly asking the very question her blonde cousin was about to utter. The Uzumaki simply smiled, which went unseen thanks to the divider as he placed a hand over his stomach for a brief moment before clenching his fist. He then relaxed and stated, apologies ladies, but I must be going now. I have some things to attend before the ball. I'll see you both tonight. The two princesses then heard the sounds of his retreating footsteps and the door closing behind him, leaving the two princesses alone. They exchanged looks. It would seem that Naruto's history would still remain a mystery for now. However, bit by bit, they were learning more about him. It was only a matter of time before they found the kink in his armor and discovered his past. Meanwhile, Alicia's former office. Luca hummed merrily to herself as she diligently polished her master's dancing shoes to a mirror shine. His clothes were clean, pressed, free of lint, and his signature Hanya mask had also been clean and polished as well. Before she met Naruto, she was just one of many orphan slave girls being sold on the black market, except that she had the distinction of being a dark elf, which made her both rare and valuable. A premium collector's item, as many of the slave merchants called her. She remembered being crammed in a too small cage, being fed half-eaten scraps and lying in her own filth. Being told about what would become of her day after day by her captors. The things they said still gave her nightmares to this day. Then, out of nowhere, she was bought and taken by the human who would become her master. In those first days, she would constantly hurl insults at him and threaten him if he ever touched her, fearing that he had only taken her for whatever demented and depraved pleasures he had in mind. Instead, he treated her with nothing but kindness and patience. He fed her good food, gave her a large room that had a big bathtub, he taught her to read, to write, to fight, and many other things. Whenever she did something wrong, he didn't beat her or yell at her or say cruel things to her or threaten her. Ever calm and patient, he would gently correct her and help her figure out how to do better and avoid making further mistakes, and would only ever punish her if she stepped over the line. Without him, she would have just been another nameless slave, used and abused until she died, then her body would have been thrown into the trash and forgotten about. She hated humans with extreme prejudice like her friend Chloe, who was also a former slave, but her master Naruto? He was special. Truly and utterly special. She would happily serve him, protect him, kill for him, and if he so demanded or asked, she would happily bear him as many children as her body could handle. Anything he wanted, it was his. No questions asked. Now if only he would start paying more attention to her than those damned human princesses. What was he thinking? Surely he couldn't be thinking of claiming them as potential mates. Just imagining him in bed with those damned humans just made her skin crawl. I know that look. You're feeling jealous, aren't you? Spoke the form of her master, making the black-haired girl stiffen up and turn around, facing her master who was now sitting at a desk. Seriously, how did he walk so silently? It was almost inhuman. She didn't even sense his presence, even with the enhanced senses she was gifted due to being an elf. Jealous? Me? How ludicrous. Those prissy and weak human princesses have nothing on a proud dark elf like me. Luca shouted in denial, making her master chuckle a bit. I never said anything about the princesses. Luca. Come here. Her master instructed, making a "come hither" motion with a lone finger. She obeyed him without question and approached, and as soon as she was within arm's reach, the Uzumaki lifted her into his lap, one hand supporting her by holding her back and the other cupping her chin. "Now don't you fret, Luca. No one, nothing could ever replace you. You have no reason to be jealous." He spoke to her in a comforting tone, planting a quick peck on her lips which made the young elf smile warmly, but it soon fell as she muttered, "I still don't like it. Those girls, they aren't worthy of you. Because they are human? Or because you think that if I have other girls and lovers that you won't have my attention and that you'll be forgotten about in the background?" Her master questioned in a slightly more stern tone, causing his loyal retainer to look away in shame, which only confirmed his suspicions. "I promise you, Luca, you won't be forgotten about even if I were to take multiple wives and/or lovers. There will be no special treatment and no playing favorites. Now, please try not to worry or fret. You are and will always be my retainer, and if I desire it more than that." He whispered the last part, planting a longer and deeper kiss to her soft lips, making the young half-elf moan into the kiss. A sense of bliss coming over her, wishing that this moment could last forever. Being embraced and kissed by the person who matters most to her. The only thing that could make this moment better was if he were to demand that she bear his babies and force her down on the desk and take her right there. He then broke off the kiss and he traced a lone finger on her cheek, making her shudder in delight. "As you wish, Naruto-sama. Whatever you desire, I am yours. Your happiness means more to me than anything else in the world." He slowly nodded and then gestured towards a map in front of them on the desk. "Did you prepare everything like I asked?" At his question, Luca almost immediately leapt off his lap and ripped open a nearby drawer, and started pulling out small figurines from it, all the while muttering herself and calling herself things like "stupid" and "useless." She then arranged the figurines at various landmarks on the map, each one bearing the likeness of either the princess knights, common soldiers, and of course their ones that resembled her master and the Queen Olga herself. Once she was finished, Naruto nodded in satisfaction and began surveying the map while pulling out some documents that he had procured from Beardsley's former office. If there is one thing I have to say about that old pedocreep Beardsley, he had a good filing system for important documents. The whiskered teen spoke in a half-joking and half-serious tone. "Our army is strong, but I am the sole commanding officer that leads it. I still have yet to find potential commanders and leaders to help lighten the workload. We also don't have a viable spy network as of yet, so the gathering of information is limited at best. Most of the information I gathered during my excursions may be outdated. Fortunately, old Beardsley's papers can help rectify that for now." Naruto muttered as he stared at the figurine of himself and Olga at the first fortress. "If it is your wish, Naruto-sama, I will proudly lead your troops into battle and kill many enemies in your name," Luca declared, which made her master chuckle and appreciatively pat the top of her head. "Thanks for the offer, Luca, but you're still in training. I couldn't bear the thought of sending you into open battle unprepared, much less losing you. Regrettably, my options for officers are virtually non-existent. Mindless drones and demonic beasts don't make for good leaders. My mother has no access to her magic, so she would be vulnerable, and Chloe wishes to remain by her side to protect her from harm. So that leaves me to lead the army by myself." He spoke thoughtfully before he pointed towards the map, more specifically at the Black Citadel, their home. "I left a garrison of troops here to protect our home in case we need to fall back. Doubtful that'd happen, but best not to leave things to chance or get careless." He then pointed up towards the second fortress, their next target, and continued. "According to the former Prime Minister's papers, there's a paltry force of some 150 men protecting the second fortress, most of them being volunteers or militia. Ha! Stupid humans. The most defensible fortress having almost no soldiers to defend it. That's so pathetic it makes me want to laugh in their faces. Human arrogance truly knows no boundaries." Luca loudly exclaimed while laughing in amusement, her master sharing in this as he chuckled as well. "I guess they didn't figure that the Legion would so easily make it past the first fortress. You're right though, it is pathetic. Still, Princess Prim must have hired mercenaries to bolster the number of troops defending her fortress. Until we know who and what we're dealing with, it'd be best not to become overconfident ourselves. I refuse to underestimate my foes under any circumstances. The whiskered teen muttered as he turned his attention to the next landmark on the map, the third fortress. The third fortress is governed by the priestess Kaguya. She's from the east like me, though not from the shinobi nations. According to the correspondence, there are approximately 1,500 church soldiers guarding it, along with 300 of Kaguya's private army of acolytes who are said to be well-versed in martial arts and magic. Naruto mused to himself as he picked up the figurine of the priestess herself. So she is not directly related to the church? Luca questioned, finding it a bit odd that a foreigner would align herself with the church and join the alliance. No. Story goes that Celestine herself approached her and invited her to join the alliance to fend off legion incursions. Enemy of my enemy and all that. He replied before shifting his focus onto the next fortress. The fourth fortress is manned by a mercenary named Maya who was nominated as a princess knight by Celestine herself. She has about 1,000 of her own mercenaries under her command, plus another 1,500 church soldiers. Her mercs are strong but undisciplined, so she'll likely be the wild card here. After I killed Vult and turned him into a drone, I scanned his memories. Seems that she had some measure of history with him. He mused, his words earning a look of disgust from his retainer. Please don't tell me she was in relations with him. I don't see how anyone could fall for a thug and misogynist like that Vult guy. Luca grumbled, but her disgust quickly changed to some sadistic amusement since Vult's animated corpse was now being used to pick up animal excrements. No. He saved her life when she first started out. I guess she fell under what is known as the halo effect. Her master responded thoughtfully, making his retainer raise an eyebrow as she parroted in confusion the halo effect. It is a form of thinking, a mental bias, where our perception of a person is positively influenced. For example, in Maya's case, after she was rescued by Vult she somehow got it in her head that he was a good person, when we both know that is not the case. As a matter of fact, I have seen the halo effect before. He explained and then fell silent as he left the sentence hanging. Before Queen Olga adopted you? His retainer asked, earning a slow nod from her master who now had a bitter look on his face. He then shrugged his shoulders, seemingly shaking off his soured mood and then turned his attention to the next fortress, the fifth one. The fifth fortress is controlled by Roro, the halfling. She has about 4,000 battle-ready halfling soldiers under her banner and another 2,000 church soldiers. This fortress is built into the side of a mountain, so it'll have strong defensive capabilities as well. On the plus side, Roro is often known to act recklessly and is short-tempered. We can use that to our advantage. He mused aloud and then focused his attention to the final two fortresses which were practically a stone's throw away from each other. The sixth and seventh fortresses are controlled by both Claudia and Celestine respectively, though Claudia maintains control of all military matters. The Levantine family has about 2,000 of their own soldiers under their command with Claudia herself and her father-in-law Graves at the head. They'll go to the seventh fortress and garrison there alongside 7,000 church soldiers. They'll likely dig in, bolster their defenses. Make us fight for every square inch of the White Citadel. We take and control all of the fortresses, this war will be over. Naruto finished as he leaned back in his seat with a slightly weary sigh. If we launch an assault on the second fortress, then they could launch an attack to flank our army. Luca mused as she pointed at their current target. They could, but it'd be a long march and it'd take time for their armies to group together. Nah, I'm banking that they'll abandon the mercs of the second fortress as sacrificial pawns. Probably send false promises of reinforcements and leave them to die to give themselves time. Naruto responded dryly, obviously disapproving of the callous sacrifice of other people's lives. I doubt the princesses would approve of that. The black-haired girl muttered, to which her master solemnly replied indeed, but who says that they're the ones in charge? Naruto slowly shook his head and then spoke nah. Those in power hate it when the status quo is changed or disrupted, it makes them feel threatened. The leaders of the church, whomever they are, will do anything to maintain their power, even if it means sacrificing the fortresses and whoever lives there. Which is why we're going to extend a chance for our foes to surrender at every given opportunity. We are not soulless monsters, in spite of whatever the church may have to say about us. In response, Luca let out a loud humph and stated irrelevant. I do not care what the dirty humans have to say about us. They can all die for all I care. But if it is your will, I shall obey and agree with your policies. Still we do have one advantage: the dumb little humans don't yet know the true size of the Legion horde. She spoke the last part with some sadistic glee. She then added as an afterthought, wait, what's stopping the church from seeking outside help from foreign nations? Aside from plain old stubborn pride? The Church of the Goddess isn't very popular outside of Eos. Apparently many non-human dignitaries and visitors have a tendency of disappearing when visiting Eos, most especially when they come to the White Citadel. Naturally bandits and brigands are blamed for the disappearances, which is a convenient but plausible reason. He answered with a small sigh, making his retainer purse her lips. Since there's no evidence, the church can easily evade any accusations, but non-human foreigners must still be wary of them and are generally distrustful of them. Luca mused aloud while running a hand through her raven-colored locks. Her master nodded and then commanded her, indeed. Celestine tries to help mediate and keep the peace, but she is just one woman in a corrupt world that will eventually swallow her up too. Now then, draw me a warm bath, Luca, and fetch my soaps. I want to be clean and presentable for the ball tonight. At his command, stars filled the young half-elf's eyes, since bathing her master was one of her favorite activities and duties since she got to touch and caress her master all over his well-toned and powerful body. Right away, Naruto-sama. The young elf shouted and then vanished in a blur of motion, very eager to assist her master with his bath. This day just kept on getting better and better for Harem, that reminded her perhaps she should ask her master for a dance at the ball. Oh, she couldn't wait to be flaunted and showed off like a prize trophy in front of all those disgusting humans who would look on in jealousy of her master and realize just how truly inferior they were in comparison. The day wasn't over yet, and there was still time for it to continue to get even better. Claudia stood guard over her friend Celestine. The high elf was currently resting in her soft and plush bed, sleeping soundly as the female Bishop Eleonora silently observed and dabbed the goddess' forehead with a wet towel to help cool her down. Thankfully, Celestine had gotten past the worst of it, but was still greatly weakened by her ordeal. The invincible Valkyrie dare not leave her side lest an assassin attempt to murder her again. The question now was, how was she poisoned? The most likely explanation is that perhaps her food was tainted, so Claudia took measures to ensure that every scrap of food or drop of liquid meant for the elven goddess was to be tested for poison before it was brought before her. If anyone dared to take another chance to end her life, they would be ready for the assassin. Standing next to the faithful bodyguard was her father-in-law, who was pointing towards a map as she listened to his words. Therefore, I shall send a more mobile force to swiftly march to the second fortress and reinforce the mercs there. Around 1,000 men will be sent to garrison there and hold the stronghold until an additional force of 3,000 arrives to flank the enemy army. We will trap them between the two forces and take down their leader. Her father-in-law, Graves, spoke sternly. His words making the brunette woman nod in agreement. Yes. That sounds like a sound strategy. Even if we don't get the leader, we may be able to halt their momentum. The guardian stated, with the aged knight smirking proudly. I shall see to the arrangements. You stay here and guard Celestine-sama. Graves spoke, earning a salute from his daughter-in-law. He was right, her place was next to her charge and her duty was to protect her from harm. She had no reason for concern since her father-in-law was a seasoned and experienced warrior, and his strategy was sound. Graves quietly departed, leaving the three women alone. Those Legion bastards, how dare they harm Celestine-sama? Claudia grumbled under her breath, still seething that someone had attempted to murder one of the kindest and most pure people in all of Eos. Was there anything that damned Olga wouldn't do to achieve victory? She could almost swear that she could hear that witch cackling in sadistic pleasure. She then rubbed her temples with a deep sigh after that disastrous last meeting. Kaguya and Maya both returned to their respective fortresses to secure them in case the enemy somehow bypassed or conquered the second fortress. It was very fortunate that the halflings of the fifth fortress knew how to run things even without Ruro's presence. Not surprising given that girl's wild and excitable nature. Her musing was cut short as she heard a commotion down in the cathedral. She wasn't sure what, but it sounded like there was some kind of argument. Some sort of threat. Drawing her sword, Claudia rushed down the stairs and into the cathedral and found a small group of bishops were arguing with some commoners. "Where is Celestine-sama? We wish to speak with her immediately." One of the commoners pleaded rather desperately. "I am sorry, but we were just told that Celestine-sama is not seeing visitors right now." One of the bishops replied helplessly. His words did not appease the petitioners at all as they began shouting in dismay, still demanding to see the goddess herself. "Enough!" Claudia shouted, her voice booming across the cathedral, silencing everyone inside as she made her way down the steps and approached the gathered crowd. "What is the meaning of this? Why do you need to see the goddess so badly?" she asked with a stern expression. The commoners glanced at one another and were about to speak, but then they looked up at the top of the stairs that the Valkyrie had just descended from. She followed their gazes to the top of the steps and to her shock, saw Celestine herself, breathing heavily as she looked down at the people. Her face pale and her body seemed ready to collapse at any moment. "Celestine-sama. Please stop. You shouldn't be out of bed. You need rest." Eleonora pleaded from behind the high elf, trying to get her to go back to bed and recover fully from the poison. "Noth people they need may cannot just rest and let their sorrows go unanswered." Celestine spoke weakly, her body covered in a sheen of sweat as she limped her way down the stairs. Each step down seemed to be a tremendous effort for her. There even seemed to be a few times where she was about to trip but regained her balance. "Celestine-sama. Go back to bed. I will handle this. Just go rest." Claudia also pleaded, but was ignored by the goddess. The commoners and townsfolk began whispering amongst themselves, clearly worried for the high elf's health. "She looks sick. Is she okay? I didn't know elves could get sick. Look at her, she clearly needs bed rest." These were some of the things that could be clearly heard as the various petitioners whispered amongst each other. Finally, Celestine seemed unable to continue as she set herself down and sat on the middle step, clearly exhausted from making it this far. "Do not worry over me. I am just feeling a little under the weather. Please tell me what ails you. How can I help? What has caused you such distress?" she asked in a kind voice. In spite of her condition, she still cared far more than others than for herself and forced herself out of bed to help those in need. Her kindness moved the people to tears as they began crying and snotting all over the place. One villager, an older man who more or less held it together despite the building tears, managed to speak up countless apologies for disturbing your rest when you are sick. "Celestine-sama, but we need your help. Every month or so, church soldiers come and ask people for donations to help fund the war effort. Normally, we give our coin gladly to support our troops so they may better fight the legion. Lately, however, more and more soldiers have been coming and demanding more coin. Earlier today many of us here refused because we needed to buy seed for harvest or food for our family, so the soldiers beat us up and took our money by force." At this revelation, Eleonora, Claudia, and Celestine all had shocked expressions. Soldiers of the church robbing and assaulting people. That was truly awful and unforgivable. The female bishop adopted a thinking pose and then spoke up. "Was there not an incident some time ago where some con men were posing as members of the clergy who tricked people into giving donations as well?" These words made everyone mutter in agreement as the memory of that incident came flooding back to them. "Ah, that's right. I remember that happening. The church were extremely embarrassed about it too. Someone must be trying to start something similar again." A random villager spoke up with the others muttering in agreement since that made sense. "So this time thieves are posing as soldiers, eh? I promise you all, this matter will be thoroughly investigated. I must ask you all to please give as many details on these imposters as possible so that we may identify them and clap them in irons." Claudia spoke in a professional tone, earning nods of agreement from the various villagers and commoners who were eager to lend their assistance and cooperation. Celestine then added, "We shall find these criminals and bring them to justice. For now though, the church will compensate you for your lost coin. Bishop Eleonora, please make the arrangements." Upon her order, the female bishop slowly nodded with a kind smile. "I shall. However, first I must escort you back to bed. Immediately." You have already pushed yourself too much," she stated, and then helped the goddess to her feet, assisting her back up the stairs to her private chambers. The high elf wanted to protest at first, but she decided that perhaps some rest would be good for now. Even at this moment she feared that she could faint dead away. While her heart was willing, her body couldn't obey her wishes at this time. Now that she thought about it, this may be an opportunity to meditate in the privacy of her chambers and see if she could summon a vision of Olga or her general. Any information that could help end the threat of the Legion would be of tremendous value. However, on the other hand, between the assassination attempt and these robberies, perhaps just this once, she should focus her attention closer to home. Meanwhile, First Fortress. I hate this, Alicia muttered as she sipped some punch, a deep scowl on her face as the ballroom she was standing in was filled with various aristocrats and nobles. The sounds of soft and mellow music played as the guests seemed to comfortably chat away, ignoring the presence of the demonic guards that watched everything and everyone. Unlike the commoners or servants that seemed fearful of what may happen next, the nobility didn't seem fearful at all. She caught faint snippets of conversations that seemed to be centered around their queen. They all knew this party was just an excuse to gather them all in one place so that the Dark Queen may gain oaths of fealty from the man they seemed all too eager to jump on the bandwagon out of convenience. So long as their wealth and status remained, they didn't seem to care who was in charge. You always did hate parties. Prim spoke with a small smile, her face obscured by her new butterfly mask. Her words made her blonde cousin scoff and adjust her wolf mask. It was true. She always hated balls and parties. It was always the same thing. While she didn't mind the food or occasional dance, she always viewed such events as pointless displays of status or wealth amongst nobles. She would much rather be leading armies into battle against the Legion than suffer any pompous nobles giving false congratulations to one another. I think I might attempt to escape and hang myself from the gallows, Alicia muttered in despair, wishing she was almost anywhere but here. Just endure it for a little while. I'll be right here with you. Prim spoke comfortingly, the gentle princess soothingly tracing a hand on her cousin's forearm. The blonde knight gave a stiff nod in response. For Prim's sake, she would endure virtually any torture. Princess Prim. It has been too long, spoke a voice that bordered between masculine and feminine, causing the two cousins to turn and see a young noble approach them. While his face was obscured from a mask, his voice was definitely familiar to them. Alicia remembered him as one of countless suitors that tried to gain her cousin's hand. Oh, what was his name again? There are so many Albert something. Or was it Lambert? She decided to go with Albert for now. Albert? Chuckled as he took the pinkette by the hand and kissed it, his fingers rubbing the back of her hand as he spoke. It is so marvelous to see you again, princess. I would recognize your beauty anywhere, even if your face is hidden behind a mask. The blonde knight rolled her eyes as she thought to herself, yeah right. All you recognized was that distinctive pink hair. Wait, is he still holding her hand? She thought the last part upon noticing that the suitor had yet to release her cousin from his grip. Oh, yes, of course, kind sir. Thank you. The pinkette replied shyly, trying to pull her hand away from the masked noble. Albert gave a broad grin in an attempt to appear suave or charming as he spoke. You must be beside yourself right now, being a prisoner. To a ruffian with absolutely no sense of honor, no less. Kidnapping you when you came under a white flag. How despicable. His tone sounded over the top, and it sounded as if he were saying things he believed that he wanted the pinkette to hear. The two cousins were quite familiar with this. This would always happen whenever someone wanted to court the gentle and kind princess. That's not exactly what happened. You see, Prim tried to explain that she technically broke the truce by challenging Naruto to a duel, but she was cut off by the masked suitor. Have no fear, my dear princess. If that monster dares try to claim you for his bed, I shall rush to your defense, rapier in hand. Albert promised with a laugh that was perhaps a bit too loud as some partygoers began looking in their direction. Alicia sneered since the man was clearly posturing and trying to make himself sound and look more impressive than he was in an attempt to charm Prim or other nobles. She had finally had enough and was about to drown him in the nearest punch bowl, but someone else acted first. A strong hand appeared on the suitor's wrist and gripped it tight. The sounds of bones cracking could be heard as a figure wearing an ornate silver and black Hanya mask stared at the masked noble. "Pardon the intrusion, but Primheim promised me a dance, and I intend to collect. Unless you wish to come to her defense." "A rapier in hand, was it?" Naruto asked in a chilling voice, his eyes cold and detached, lacking any sort of warmth or humanity as Albert let out a silent scream of terror and quickly shook his head in denial, obviously not going to back up his boasts. The Forge Master released him and then turned towards the Pinkette with a hand extended to her. "Primheim, may I have this dance?" he asked her politely, his eyes now filled with kindness and care. The pink-haired princess smiled sweetly and gave a curtsy, accepting his hand as he gently guided her to the dance floor, leaving behind a former suitor to nurse his wrist and Alicia to watch from the sidelines as she glared at the Hanya, almost daring him to try something with her cousin. "You seemed like you were in need of a rescue there. Apologies for the fib," he whispered to the gentle princess, who simply shook her head with a smile. "The intervention is appreciated. Had it continued, I think Alicia would have done much worse." She replied with a soft giggle. A waltz began playing in the background as they took their positions on the dance floor, and then began dancing their way across the ballroom. Naruto held her hand in his own and placed his other hand on the small of her back as they stepped across the dance floor. "You know, I think this is the first time I have ever danced at a formal event," he admitted with a soft chuckle. His words confused her for a moment, until she giggled a bit upon realizing that no parties had ever been held at the Black Citadel since only monsters had lived in the Dark Queen's lands. Creatures who can only think of raping women would definitely not be pleasant party guests. "You could have fooled me. You seem like a natural dancer," she replied sweetly, noting that they seemed to almost be gliding across the dance floor with ease, as if they had danced together hundreds of times before. It felt almost unnatural, but certainly enjoyable. Many dances she had during parties and events were often awkward. Sometimes it involved stale conversation or bad dancing from her partner. Naruto, though, she felt quite comfortable. Even with his signature Hanya mask on, she could tell he was smiling as he replied to her, "I learned to dance thanks to my mother and Chloe. Elves love to dance." To many elves, high or dark, dancing is a form of expression and in some cases a form of courtship. Some forms of dance, especially a few created by the Dark Elves, are extremely intimate. He spoke at the end in a slightly husky voice, pulling the princess a little closer to his body. He then whispered to her a description of one form of a courting dance created by the Dark Elves, causing Prim to blush deeply beneath her mask as she whispered to herself, "Goodness gracious. That seems quite lewd." The whiskered teen snickered a bit, taking notice that Alicia was glaring at him from the sidelines. Apparently she isn't liking how he is holding her cousin so close to him. "Naruto-san, I ask you a question?" she asked him politely, to which he answered back, "Ask me anything you like, Primheim. Why did you take the poison first? We are enemies and yet, you basically spared my life. It doesn't make much sense to me," she asked him, earning a slow "ah" from the Forge Master. He seemed to briefly consider how to answer her, but then she sensed another smile beneath his mask once he found the words he wanted to convey. "For one thing, I had no reason or wish to see you dead. For another, I admired your courage and bravery to stand up to me and attempt to rescue your cousin. As I previously mentioned, I wanted to see how far you would take it, and you didn't disappoint. Also, I'd hate to see the life of a kind, brave and beautiful young woman like you be snuffed out." He answered her, the sincerity of his words making her eyes widen. Many times people had given her compliments or said nice things in the hopes of earning her favor, but Naruto wasn't like that. He means what he says and says what he means. There is no deception or bravado in his voice, he actually means it. "Also, I kind of have a weakness for the ladies," the blonde teen added in a joking tone, earning a giggle and a playful slap from the princess. She wasn't sure if that was a serious statement or not, but she still found it amusing. The song slowly came to an end, and Prim found herself glancing over the Uzumaki's shoulder, noting the presence of numerous waiting nobles who were eyeing her hungrily. No doubt waiting for their moment to pounce on her and ask for a dance. Easily sensing the cause of her distress, the blonde spun her around so that he was now facing the nobles, noting their predatory gazes. Deciding to have a little fun and to give the princess an out, he asked her in a too loud voice, "Primheim, remember what you said to me after I claimed you as my prisoner?" She tilted her head in confusion as she replied, "Could you remind me, please? Also, why are you speaking so loudly?" As soon as her questions left her lips, she sensed a sudden shift in the mood within the ballroom. Her dance partner spun her around once more so that she could see the nobles that had been eyeing her and saw that their hungry gazes were replaced by confused ones. "Your exact words were as follows, 'You may do with me as you wish.'" He spoke loudly, his words immediately making her remember. Yes, she did say those exact words after her defeat. Before she could react, the Uzumaki lifted up his mask and placed his lips against hers. She let out a confused and surprised yelp that was muffled by the blonde's mouth and stiffened up, but soon she melted into the kiss and embraced him as she returned the gesture with a soft moan. A feeling of intoxication overcame her as she felt warmth flood her body. For a brief moment she felt strong, powerful, like she could crush mountains with her bare hands. Then, the Uzumaki broke off the kiss and pulled his mask back down, completely obscuring his face once again as he gave her a wink and gestured behind him. She glanced over his shoulder once again, and saw the nobles who had been hungrily eyeing her now seemed to be in the throes of despair and disappointment. In their minds, the prized princess that they had long coveted had been claimed by the Legion General as his personal trophy. "Sorry about that, but at least now they'll leave you alone," Naruto whispered to her, but she waved off his apology dismissively. "Think nothing of it, Naruto-san. I kind of enjoyed that," she whispered back with a blush that was partially obscured by her pink butterfly mask. At least for now she could perhaps enjoy a party without being bothered by admirers or suitors. Wait, was she forgetting about someone? An angry growl came from behind the Uzumaki as a hand gripped his shoulder tightly with enough force that made him wince, even with his unusually high pain tolerance. He slowly turned towards the aggressor and found Alicia staring daggers at him. In the background, the Uzumaki's demonic soldiers were about to step in, but he put a stop to them with a wave of his hand. "Princess Alicia, would you care to dance?" he asked calmly. Alicia sneered at him, and seemed to be weighing her options on how to approach the situation. She seemed to conclude that discretion was the better part of valor in this instance, despite her instincts telling her to jam her fist down the Forgemaster's throat, except he had a demon army and a lot of potential hostages. If she messed up, there would be a bloodbath. "Fine," she replied gruffly and held out a hand for her fellow blonde to take as he placed his free hand to the small of her back. Sensing the hostility in the air, Prim excused herself and retreated to the nearest table that was currently bearing sweets and desserts as a new song began to play, prompting both Alicia and Naruto to begin dancing across the floor, ignoring everyone around them from casual observers to fellow dancers. The female knight's attention was laser-focused on one person and one person alone, Naruto himself. "You're not angry about that kiss, are you? If you want one, I'd be happy to oblige you. I can't turn down a request from a lovely woman, especially such a fierce-looking one such as yourself." He spoke to her charmingly, though inwardly, he was sweating bullets. There were only 3 things that Naruto truly feared in his life: being alone again, failing his loved ones, and divine feminine fury. Despite his flirting, she understandably didn't seem amused in the slightest. "Touch my cousin again, and I swear that I'll kill you. Chivalry and honor be damned," she whispered harshly, wishing that she had a sword in her hand so that she may jam it either in his heart or his loins, may both, just for thoroughness. "That doesn't sound like something a knight should say. I assure you, though, my intentions were noble. I said and did those things so that her suitors would leave her alone, at least for the evening. It was a kind of a spur-of-the-moment type situation." He spoke honestly, his words seemingly placating the blonde princess, her anger slowly melting as she saw her cousin happily munching on some cake, and for once she wasn't being accosted by anyone nor needed her protection. "Fine. I suppose I'll let it slide, just this once. Though if you ever do that again, I promise that I'll make you regret it." She spoke bitterly as she glared at her fellow blonde with a critical eye, her wolf mask making her look all the more fearsome. "Very well then. I understand completely. Though let it be said, should the day ever come that I take advantage of a woman against her will, I pray that I am appropriately punished for it." The whiskered teen spoke, making a cross my heart gesture across his chest, satisfying the princess knight. You know I don't usually dance at these sorts of events. Alicia spoke out of nowhere, briefly surprising herself at how casually she let that slip. She wasn't under some kind of spell, was she? No, she was certain that she was not. She had undergone extensive mental training to guard herself against mental attacks and trickery employed by some mages. Yet she felt nothing influencing her mind. Now that she thought about it, her captor was a good dancer. No offense meant, but you don't seem like the type of person to attend balls or parties. You seem more like a woman of action. I'm guessing you only attend such events out of either obligation or to help protect your cousin. The whiskered teen spoke, earning a nod from the blonde princess. He was right, of course, there was no denying it. It always feels like a waste of time and resources attending these types of parties. Especially when you have the Legion knocking on your doors almost every day. Correction, had. She added the last part since the Legion had now taken her fortress, and she was now a prisoner in her own home. She would never be able to live this down. That reminds me, during our duel, I noticed that your fighting style strongly relies on speed. Your swordsmanship is superb and your technique was utterly flawless in my opinion, but it seems to me that your main weakness is your lack of stamina. The longer a fight drags on, the worse off you are. You must be used to defeating your opponents with ease. Makes me wonder, is it because you are so strong or your opponents are so weak? Or is it both? He questioned gently, making the princess sigh. You're not wrong. I trained hard, every day, practicing and honing my skills with a blade until I was eventually nominated as the Princess Knight of the First Fortress. Celestine Sama herself congratulated my swordsmanship and bade me to use my skills to protect others. Unfortunately, whenever I sparred with my troops, I would always beat them with ease, and they would always look up at me in jealousy. Not to boast, Booty sometimes think I make them feel inadequate or envious because of my skills. Wait, why am I telling you all of this? What manner of trickery is this? She demanded at the end, now realizing she had been carrying on for a while and said far more than she intended. The Uzumaki simply shrugged his shoulders as they continued dancing without missing a beat as he replied, this isn't the first time this has happened. People tend to get really chatty around me for some reason. I honest to goodness don't know why. My mother thinks it is because I have some sort of aura of charisma about me that makes most people feel comfortable around me, though that is a subject of some debate. You don't say. Alicia deadpanned, not believing him in the slightest, though she supposed that he didn't really have a reason to lie about that. It was definitely weird though. He chuckled in a slightly awkward manner and shifted the subject by asking, if you're ever interested, would you care to train with me? She was surprised by his question and almost tripped over her own feet, but managed to regain her balance at the last second and stared at him wide-eyed. You want to? You want me to train with you? Why? She asked him, stammering with her words a bit as the Uzumaki nodded at her question. Of course. I can always use a new training partner to help practice with. You don't have to if you don't want to. He answered, emphasizing that she had a choice of whether she wanted to join him or not. She pursed her lips, almost considering his invitation before she asked him, Naruto hat, do you see me and Prim as? Are we meant to be your slaves? Trophies? Playthings? What are we to you? Without any hesitation the Forge Master replied to her, I was hoping that we could be friends. At his answer, the world seemed to slow down around Alicia as she could only stare into his deep blue eyes, not a hint of deception in them. Friends? Seriously? That was all? No way, no funking way. Not possible. Simply not possible. There was just no way. No one could possibly be this selfless and pure-hearted, least of all a member of the Legion, and yet Yeath always acted with honor and integrity. Offers still open if you're interested. No pressure. He offered once again as the music came to a close. He then lifted up his mask and kissed his fellow blonde on the hand, as if to say, thank you for the dance. She mumbled something incoherently and then separated from him, her eyes wide as she seemed to wander off aimlessly, as if she were in a daze. Wow, you're really slaying them tonight, aren't you, Naruto-sama? Spoke a familiar voice next to the Uzumaki, he chuckled a bit as he looked down at the form of his loyal retainer, Luca. The young half-elf grinning cheekily at him while wearing a black dress, complete with a panther mask. "You're so charming that you don't even try," she added with a giggle, earning a small shrug from her master. "It's a gift. One I don't have full control over. You should know. Our first days together you gave increasingly graphic threats about how you would castrate me, and within the week you were ready and willing to serve me, hand and foot." He quipped, earning some melodious laughter from his retainer. "Guilty. What can I say though? You're just a naturally good person. Not really sure how to explain it, plus you were so kind and patient with me," she muttered nostalgically, making her master grin a bit. "If you say so, then I won't refute it. At any rate, does my beautiful retainer wish to dance with her master?" he asked while extending his hand to her, making his servant giggle as she accepted his hand. "For you. I'd dance the night away and then rock your world in the bedroom." She spoke with a cheeky smile, a blush appearing on her face which was hidden beneath her mask. Her master gave a soft laugh as the two assumed their positions and began to dance as the next song played. Luca's ears perked up as she heard the other humans whispering to each other. Many were shocked to learn that another dark elf existed, some were whispering in envy that they didn't own her, and others were bristling with envy at the sight of the Legion General dancing not only with the fair princesses but an elf maiden as well. Spirits, she wanted to laugh at those stupid humans. What they wanted, they couldn't have, and her master had earned everything that was his. It wasn't just handed off to him because he was the son of some big-shot noble. Her beloved master worked hard, every day, to get to his current level. There was no possible way these humans could compare. "Thinking about something? Something good?" he asked as he noticed the starry-eyed looks he was getting from his retainer. "Just thinking about how magnificent you are," she replied honestly, which made the Uzumaki shake his head with a sly smile. "Careful. You keep singing my praises and I'll probably get a swollen ego." He spoke in a half-joking tone, making the black-haired half-elf snicker a bit. "I'd prefer it if something else of yours swelled up," she quipped, glancing down at his groin. She then continued, "Naruto-sama, you have yet to do anything more to me than kiss or cuddle with me. Why have you not taken me as your lover?" Ouch. Seems like someone was getting impatient. Not that he could necessarily blame her given her strong feelings and dedication to him. "Largely because I have been busy juggling around multiple duties. I promise you though, you'll get your turn. I cannot say when exactly, but you will," he responded gently, making the young half-elf puff out her cheeks a bit. She then gave him a saucy grin and spoke in a teasing tone, "Fian, I'll wait a bit longer. Though if you make me wait too long, I'll get really lonely and won't be able to concentrate on my duties. Then you'll have to punish me really hard." She whispered out the last part in a sultry tone. Her master simply nodded in understanding and wiggled his eyebrows, all the while making a mental note to not underestimate the thirstiness of elf girls. The dance suddenly came to an abrupt end as a loud trumpeting came from near the currently empty throne that was overlooking the ballroom. Luca was a bit miffed that her moment with her master had come to a halt, but grinned since she knew what was going to come next. Standing next to the throne was Chloe, wearing ceremonial armor and wearing a mask that resembled a hawk. Announcing Her Majesty, Queen Olga Discordia. The blonde half-elf announced, which caused a spotlight to focus on the queen herself, who slowly and gracefully descended down a flight of stairs. The queen wore a dark purple dress while wearing an owl mask, her signature scepter in hand as she approached the throne. Chloe gently took her mistress' hand and assisted her down the final set of steps and escorted her to the throne. Once Olga was seated, she smiled and spoke, "Greetings to you, one and all. Welcome to my kingdom, the Garan Kingdom and soon-to-be empire. For those who wish to serve and be part of this new empire, come and pledge fealty to me. Refuse and there will be certain consequences." Chloe cleared her throat and unfurled a scroll as she called out, "When your name is called, you shall approach the queen and pledge yourself to her and her empire." She paused to clear her throat once again and called out the name of a prominent noble. The nobleman let out a nervous squeak and quickly approached, almost throwing himself at the Dark Queen's feet as he dropped to his hands and knees. It didn't take long at all for her to extract the necessary pledge from him. Once he had uttered his oath, the queen shooed him away with a wave of her hand. One by one, the nobles and aristocrats were called up. Some were more reluctant than others to swear oaths of fealty to the Dark Queen, but in the end, they obeyed since they feared her potential wrath and the waiting demon soldiers who watched their every move. In the background, Alicia watched this event unfold and let out a disgusted scoff upon seeing a few who willingly pledged themselves to Olga, promising her support and information, and expressed their hopes that they would have prestigious positions in her burgeoning empire. Damned sellouts! Was there no honor and loyalty among them? She was utterly disgusted at how quick some of the nobility were to jump ship, and for what? More gold? Status? Prestige? Power? No doubt if Olga was on the losing end of this war, these same nobles would immediately rejoin the alliance. Fickle bastards. However, she and Prim couldn't help but notice that the queen had yet to make any official promises to these very nobles. The minutes ticked by slowly as more names were called up. There didn't seem to be any particular rhyme, reason or organization to the list as Chloe kept calling out seemingly random names, and those who hadn't yet been called were starting to sweat and feel nervous, noticing the queen's retainer seemed to be reaching the bottom of her list. At last, Chloe discarded the list of names, revealing that she had finished, leaving at least half of the present nobles unnamed and not pledged to the queen. For a brief moment, everyone wondered if the blonde half-elf would retrieve a second list, but she did not make any further movements, until the queen herself began to chuckle and waved a finger to her retainer, prompting Chloe to reach behind her queen's throne and pull out an ornate box. The queen laughed again, her voice silky smooth and melodious, but with it came a chill wind that sent shivers to everyone across the ballroom as she smiled wickedly. I am sure you are wondering why only half of the nobles present were named and invited to pledge themselves to me. The other half have no place in my kingdom or my empire. Olga stated bluntly, and snapped her fingers, prompting Chloe to open the box and dump the contents of the floor. A cascade of keys fell from the box and began clattering down on the steps as everyone watched in confusion. Keys of brass, keys of silver, keys of iron, keys of gold, all of different shapes and sizes fell down to the ground. Both of the princesses looked towards the Hanya, silently asking him what the meaning of this bizarre turn of events was. As if sensing their gazes, he turned towards them ever so slightly and raised a lone finger to his mouth to make a shushing gesture. A series of shocked gasps came from the unnamed nobles, seemingly recognizing the keys. That's my. A random unnamed noble sputtered, and then quickly caught himself and fell silent, as if he were afraid that he almost let something slip, but it was too late. Recognize them? They should be more than recognizable to their owners. Olga stated and then clapped her hands twice. Her son acknowledged the signal and snapped his fingers. On his command, a pair of demons opened the main entrance to the ballroom, allowing a crowd of people to enter. Both Prim and Alicia watched in shock as they saw a crowd of slaves enter the ballroom, their chains and shackles rattling with every movement, carrying shovels, pickaxes, knives and various other tools and weapons, their eyes ablaze with fury as they glared at the nobles who didn't receive the chance to swear themselves to Olga's service. Remember when I said that Luca was taking care of things for me? Naruto asked, directing the question to the two princesses who slowly turned to him, their eyes almost the size of dinner plates as he continued, she wasn't just preparing my dancing clothes. I had her do some investigation into the nobles within the fortress so that we may root out any and all slave owners. He added and gestured towards the slaves themselves who were glaring at their masters with deadly and fatal intentions. Slaver, that's illegal. Alicia muttered, a part of her wanting to deny the possibility that slavery was happening beneath her nose. How could she not have seen this? Was she truly so blind? If she had known about this, then she would have cut down these scum herself. She grit her teeth, her fists clenching as she felt white-hot fury fill her. She felt anger at the nobles for taking people as slaves, and she felt anger at herself for never sensing that something was amiss within her very own fortress. She wanted desperately to deny that this was reality. She wanted to tell herself that this was all a nightmare, a fevered dream, but the proof was here in front of her. Slaves of varying ages, mostly girls and women, a few small boys and teenagers. A few humans, but most were non-human, all of the non-humans being beastmen as evidenced by the features of various animals. Covered in bruises and cuts, their skin and hair dirty from lack of bathing, their bodies skinny and frail from a lack of food and care. The Dark Queen rested her head atop a loosely closed fist and spoke up. Slavery may have been outlawed by your church, but I assure you, it is very much alive and in practice in Eos. I imagine that those of you who own previously owned slaves likely paid certain tithes to the church so that they may turn a blind eye, yes? Well, those days end now. In my kingdom, slavery is a crime punishable by death. Anyone who owns a slave will be immediately sentenced to death. The now freed slaves turned on their masters, raising their weapons threateningly as they stalked towards the cowering nobles. Kindly escort the dead meat outside where a mess won't be made. The Uzumaki ordered, prompting his demonic soldiers to begin forcing the soon-to-be dead nobles outside, where their former slaves may freely take their pound of flesh for all the suffering they endured. Leniency will be shown to the spouses and the children of these traitors, of course. I am not without mercy. We are not monsters. The Dark Queen added, since there was no need to spill the blood of those who were not involved with the slaves. The testimonies of the slaves themselves revealed who was innocent and guilty after all. Once they were all gone, the doors slammed shut behind them with a resounding thud, the once comfortable atmosphere of the ballroom now filled with cold dread as everyone came to the same conclusion: Olga Discordia was not a woman to be crossed, for any reason. If that was not evident before her invasion, it certainly was now. No pleas for the lives of your subjects, Alicia? Primheim. Naruto asked the princesses, and in response they slowly shook their heads negatively. In spite of Alicia's code of chivalry and honor and Prim's kind and gentle nature, neither of them could or would defend slavers. Anyone who would enslave the life of another so callously was not worthy of life. Didn't think so. Naruto muttered, unsurprised by this. He then smirked beneath his mask and added just one more thing on the agenda. He then pointed up towards the ceiling, causing all eyes to look upwards and see the form of a bound and gagged Beardsley who was being hanged upside down with chains wrapped tight around his ankles, his face red from the blood rushing to his head as he wiggled and sobbed and made muffled noises that one could assume was him begging for his life. Alicia? As the wounded party of your former Prime Minister's betrayal, would you care to take point on this part? The Hanya asked her in a professional tone. Needless to say, despite her initial shock from just moments ago, she did not hesitate to accept her fellow blonde's invitation as she marched forward and joined him at his side as Luca stepped out of the way for her, a broad grin on the small half-elf's face. He extended his hands to the Princess Knight and conjured a scroll and another small box, the latter she recognized as something belonging to Beardsley since it bore his insignia. She accepted the items and then unfurled the scroll first to read its contents, and found it to be a list of charges. She glanced towards the Uzumaki who simply gave her a nod, prompting her to clear her throat. After collecting herself, the Princess Knight began to speak. Former Prime Minister Beardsley is hereby charged with high treason, embezzlement, misuse of funds and goods, and attempting to take a slave. More specific line. She spat out the last part in disgust before continuing. Do you deny these charges? From above, the former minister vigorously nodded his head, causing his body to swing back and forth in the air. This course of action made the blonde knight scoff, finding it ridiculous how even now he denies his traitorous actions. A worm and a coward till the end then, not that it matters. The end result would be the same. She then opened the box and found various documents which revealed the purchases he had made with the embezzled money, a shocking amount being used to hire prostitutes. Young blonde ones. No doubt so he may play out his sick fantasies that involve her. There were some other papers inside, but all she could focus on was the one page that described the prostitutes he had hired. She felt bile rise up in her throat and her face flushed red in anger as she slammed the box shut. After carefully reviewing the evidence, I find you guilty of all charges, Beardsley. I hereby sentence you to be boiled in oil until you are dead. Alicia announced loudly, making the former minister give a muffled scream of terror. Being boiled alive was potentially one of the worst ways to be executed. He would much rather be hanged or beheaded than be boiled alive. Someone get a very big pot, we are gonna have an execution tomorrow. Naruto called out, his eyes scanning over the remaining nobles who had pledged themselves to his mother. If there was ever any thoughts in their heads of rebellion or skirting around the law, they had been instantly crushed. They realized their options were to either respect the law of their new queen or be swept aside. There was no middle ground or leniency. In Naruto's opinion, laws were meaningless if they couldn't or wouldn't be enforced. People often took advantage of various loopholes or escaped the consequences through legal trickery, wordplay, or even outright bribery and intimidation. A common occurrence in his homelands, it happened throughout the entire world, no question, but in the shinobi nations. It seemed especially true. With this act done, they had officially begun laying the foundation of their future empire. Meanwhile, the White Citadel, Celestine's chambers. No, this can't be happening. Why? I just don't understand. The elven goddess muttered to herself, restlessly pacing about in her chambers. After being escorted back to her room, she took the opportunity to rest her body, and to her delight, she recovered rather quickly. A benefit of being a high elf, she supposed, being gifted with an excellent constitution. However, there was another matter troubling her. She was about to send a summons for her personal guard Claudia, but this became unnecessary as the invincible Valkyrie appeared in her chambers. The high elf was grateful to see her guard, she now desperately needed someone to confide in. Before she could open her mouth, Claudia began to speak first as she gave her report. Celestine-sama. I am pleased to report that all of the robbed civilians have been compensated and returned home. I personally interviewed them and they all said the same thing, that the church soldiers that robbed them kept their visors down, undoubtedly to conceal their identities except one. One farmer was lucky enough to see one of the criminals lift his visor up for a moment and saw a distinguishing crescent-shaped scar near his right eye. If we can find this criminal, then he can give us information on his cohorts. The goddess bodyguard reported, leaving the high elf unable to get a word in edgewise until she was finished. Now that she finally had a chance to speak, Celestine quickly spoke in an almost panicked tone. That's good to hear, but I am afraid that I have discovered something terrible. Sensing the fear in her charge's tone, the brown-haired guardian's protective instincts quickly kicked in. What? What is it? Has someone threatened you? Tried to hurt you? What happened? The Valkyrie demanded. After a long silence, Celestine finally replied, I can no longer perceive any visions. At this news, Claudia's jaw dropped and the entire world seemed to shatter around her. The goddess, leader, and protector of the Alliance and Iasis no longer able to receive her visions. Then that meant they were now blind to potential disasters, that they could no longer predict the Legion's movements or anything for that matter. Goddess. Was all Claudia could say as she hung her head low in despair, coming to a swift conclusion that dark days now lie ahead for Eos. Without Celestine's guiding hand and visions, what were they to do? If word got out about this, there would be a panic. The Alliance would be seen as vulnerable and weaker than ever. It was a severe blow, losing 2 of the 7 princesses to the Legion, and now this. Damn it all. Claudia screamed out in frustration. There was no way this was a coincidence. Whoever was behind the attempted assassination was undoubtedly behind this. If they could not kill the goddess, then they would blind her. And there was only one magic user who would potentially have the knowledge to perform this feat. Even if she supposedly lost her powers, she still had that damned Forge Master to do her bidding. Olga Discordia, I will end you. The Valkyrie promised as she gripped her sword. No matter what, she would protect Celestine and Eos, and she would see the Dark Queen pay for all her crimes. No matter the cost. Fortunately, troops were undoubtedly on their way to the second fortress to reinforce Leona's mercenary company. For now, all she could do was wait by her charge's side and wait for word from her father-in-law. The next stage of the war would soon begin. The end. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Bye bye.